Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be looking at chisels. We're going to look at how to use a chisel safely and the different jobs that a chisel is actually used for. Now you've used chisels in your Key Stage 3 project when you did your bookend, but you only use them for a little bit of time. Now obviously for a carpenter a chisel is a really important tool. It's kind of one of those basic tools along with saws, hammers, the really basic stuff that you should know really well. And because of that, obviously chiseling skills is going to be part of your carpentry skills test. Now, I've got a few different kinds of chisels to show you today. So the first one to talk about really is this is what we call a basic, like a bench chisel. Cheap as chips. You can get these ones for like literally £2 in kind of places like Wilko. You can get them. Screwfix, again, there's all kinds of different prices. This one is kind of our classic, what we call a bench chisel or a bevel edge chisel. So you can see obviously the kind of different angle that these chisels have. The angle here is called the bevel. So we've got a beveled edge and we have a completely flat edge. So that allows us to do a couple of different things. It allows us to chop down because this angle will kind of push wood out of the way. The flat edge means that we can do what's called paring, which is where we slice gently pieces of wood off. So we have it's a very versatile tool. It's used for a lot of different things. They come in different sizes. You'll always find different sizes of chisels. So we've got a 25mm and a 10mm chisel here, obviously depending on how big you're cutting, if you need to get into slightly small gaps. So those are kind of your basic standard bench chisels, your European ones. Now, obviously, I have a lot of Japanese stuff. I love the tools. I think they're really good quality, which is why I spend quite a lot of money on them. So here I have a Japanese chisel set. So this set comes with a lovely little box. It's a bit dirty now because I've used it quite a lot. This set was about £150. Now, Japanese chisels are very different from European ones. You'll notice the difference straight away. So let's take my equivalent one. So I've got 2 25mm chisels, same width. Obviously the difference is these have different handles. And if you were to look at the back, they have a very different kind of steel. And this is actually kind of what we call dished out or hollowed out. So unlike this chisel, which has a completely flat back, all the way along it's flat, this one is kind of scraped out a little bit. And that's due to the steel that these chisels are made from. It's a lot harder than the standard European ones. And it's to do with how you sharpen them, and that's why that needs to be like that. But these chisels are very, very, very tough and very hard. They're very expensive steel that these are made from. I love them personally. I think they're a great chisel to use. But obviously, if you're kind of on a budget, maybe trying to get some tools together to do some work at home, some little projects, then you just want to go for the standard bench chisels. These will absolutely do everything you need. Now, the other type of chisel that I have, again, it's another Japanese one, but there are European versions. This is called a paring chisel. So then the difference you'll notice is the handle is at a slight angle. The blade is a lot longer and it's for pushing. So what I said, paring. So when we're taking very small amounts of wood off and we want to kind of shave that piece of wood to get it just the right size, this is what the paring chisel is for, and we push along. It's not for hitting. We don't hit it with a mallet. We only ever push. But just to make you aware of kind of what's out there and the different chisels that you might see. These chisels would only really be used if you do something like timber framing, like old-fashioned barns made of big beams of oak. You would use a big chisel like this. So not something we see very commonly in a school workshop or many building sites, but still interesting to learn about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little demo of how to use a chisel properly and most importantly safely. These are very sharp objects and I have a scar on my hand to prove what happens if you don't use them safely. I managed to cut myself when I was working at university. I wasn't looking at what I was doing, I slipped and I managed to cut the back of my hand open, and it's really easily done if you're not paying full attention. But obviously you guys will, because we're going to go through that now and you're going to be absolutely perfect on it. So what I've got here for you is 2 different joints. Now these are both joints that are going to be part of your carpentry skills test. So the first one is a housing joint or half housing joint. So again, I've already marked this. I've marked my waist and I've used my tenon saw to cut my first 2 lines. That's really important. The second one is called a tenon. So this is part of your mortise and tenon joint. So that's a joint that kind of goes together in this way, and we're cutting that part. And again, I've marked my waist. I've used my accurate marking with my datums to make sure this is just right before I start cutting anything. And again, I've cut down with my tenon saw these 2 lines, which are called the shoulder lines. So those are cut. We're just going to use the chisel to finish it off. So let's have a look and see what we actually do with the chisel. Okay, so I'm going to get my pieces of wood, and the one I'm going to start with, the simplest one to do, is my tenon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my vise. You see, like I said before, so here are my marks. So I've made sure that I've kind of marked my shoulders, I've cut them so that I've got my marks from my saw, and I've marked all my waist. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this into the vise. So open up the vise, and I'm going to put it to me at an angle. Now, we know about wood, that wood has a grain. You know, you've seen it before. So wood has this pattern here on it, and that kind of gives it strength. So I wouldn't be able to snap this way, but I can chop down it, and it will split very easily if I hit it on the end. So that's what I'm going to do with my chisel. So obviously I have my mallet, which is why we always hit chisels with a mallet, a wooden mallet, not a hammer. And I'm going to use the grain to my advantage. And this is the first thing with chisels. It's called, you know, chopping. That's the first sort of part of what a chisel does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my chisel on what we call the end grain, which is the edge of the wood here that's exposed. I'm going to put it halfway up just in case it splits in a way we don't want it to, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to split the timber. Wood on the end, and I'm going to give it a firm whack with my mallet. And I have split the end of the wood. Now, so kind of a bit of a mistake, but a happy mistake for you guys, is to be careful when you are chopping, because as you can see, I've just chopped here and I actually slipped a little bit and I've hit the edge of my timber. We don't want to do that. So, nice and easy. To avoid that, one of the things you can do is aim your chisel, instead of straight down, you can aim it slightly up. And again, pop. Off comes my wood. It's the quickest way to remove timber really, really fast. And there we go. So I've split off the majority of that wood that I want to get rid of. But as we can see, there is still some wood left. We're not down to the line yet. And that is where my paring comes in handy. So like I said, paring is where we're pushing with our chisel with two hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it back in the vise. I'm going to use my chisel with two hands behind the blade. We don't never ever put a hand in front of the chisel, because that is how you end up with a nice big scar. So, two hands. I'm going to watch my line. I'm going to get down as close as I can, and I'm just going to push. And notice the angle that I'm at. I'm not going straight. I'm not going across, because if I go across, I get to the other side, and then this side of the wood can split and come out. We don't want that. So always at 45 degrees. Nice and gently. Should always be a sharp chisel, so that it's not going to do anything you don't expect it to. Again, I'm going to just push. I'm going to keep an eye on my line, just to make sure I know where I am. I've got quite a lot on this side, so what I can do is I can put my chisel on that line, and I can either use the heel of my palm, or if I wanted to, I could use my mallet, and I'm just going to push it. So now I know. There we go, and at 45 degrees. I'm just going to gently shave. And this is what that other chisel, this is what our paring chisel is for, the long one. So again, I could use this. It's got a bigger blade. I can see a bit more. I'm just going to push until I'm kind of perfectly down to my line. Then go down a little bit. And the thing with paring is it's not about being perfect. It's not about the wood being smooth at the end. You know, a lot of people make that mistake. It's not about being smooth, it's about being accurate. And as you can see from my lines, there we go, on all sides I am perfectly down to my line. So with my chisel, I have, I've shown you how to chop, I've shown you how to pare. Now we're going to have a look at a different kind of method of chopping, which is using my half housing joint. So again, I've cut down, I've marked my waist, and now I can see how I'm going to get a piece of wood kind of out of the middle of this using a chisel. So again, my wood's in the vise, about halfway. I can still see my mark is here. And for this one, I'm going to go for a slightly smaller chisel. Let's have a look. I've got two versions. I'm going to use my Japanese ones for this. So my 25mm just ever so slightly too big. So I'm going to go down to a 10mm. And again, I'm always chiseling away from me. And I'm going to go halfway. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from one side. So I'm halfway up the piece of wood. So I'm about here. And I'm going to chop across. As you can see, Some things do fly off when you do this, so be really careful of the people around you. And I'm just going to work my way down to the line as much as I can. But what I'm doing, and you'll notice I'm not going all the way through. I'm just keeping an eye on that line, going as parallel to the floor, as 90 degrees as I can. But I'm not going to go through to the other side, because as we kind of discussed, wood has a way of splitting, and it's really inconvenient when it does, but it's just about learning how timber works and how timber behaves when you do things to it. And one of the things it likes to do is if you hit it in a certain way, it likes to split. So we're going to use that, and we're going to learn that, and we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen. So as you can see here, I've chiseled halfway across, only half. And then I'm going to go from the other side, so it won't split either way. It's going to break in the middle. So back into the vise, start from the middle again. There you go, and now things are just popping out nice and lightly. There's my line. Now what I can do, I've got some waste here that won't quite come out. It's kind of stuck. So one of the things I can do is, again, I can use a wide chisel, like my bench chisel, my 25mm, and I can get the chisel into the corner and just gently tap downwards. And then, there you go, you can see it will come out. I can also get my chisel, I can just very gently scrape in the corners. And now if I want to tidy it up, if I'm not quite on my line, I can use my pairing method again with my chisel, and I can just two hands take off this way. Again, if you're going to go like this at 90 degrees across, because we can't do our 45 because this is too narrow. So I can go directly across, but what I'm going to do is, again, I'm only going to go halfway. And then when I'm there, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to come back from the other side to make sure that I don't go over my line at all. And I'm going to make sure that all that waste, all those wood chips are kind of free and clear. And there we go. There's my half housing joint. Again, I'm all the way through, nice and accurately, all on both sides. So there's our introduction on how to use a chisel. We know that we use a mallet whenever we are hitting a chisel, we're striking it. We know that we can either chop straight down or across. We can pair nice and flat, and we're always going to keep our hands nice and clear. And a chisel is a fantastic tool. I think it's one of the most useful tools that a carpenter has, and it's something you should learn to use really accurately and really well, and it's going to do you a lot of favours. So hopefully this guide's been really helpful, and it will help you to pass your carpentry skills test.